They pray, they fast, they go to the mosque, and at the same time they traffic women and drugs. Some of them become role models, invited on podcasts, and enjoy popularity for being bad boys. But how do they reconcile religion with the impermissible? Today you're looking at Young Muslim and Criminal, a book by Mohammed Qasim. This book, published in 2018 by Bristol Policy Press, it is the researcher Mohammed Qasim going back into the gangs of his native city of Bradford, where he grew up in, reconnecting with the people he spent time with and their kids to understand, like, how does it work? How do people get into crime? And as Muslims, how do these people reconcile being involved in crime and practicing Islam? But there are wider questions. Why do people fall into gangs, and what can be done to prevent it? I've met Mohammed in real life, and he's not only a really nice guy, but this is a person with very, very strong ethics. He always declined interviews or making documentaries with the mainstream media channels in there, because he knows how they're going to appropriate the topic. Does Islam actually play a role in them becoming criminal, or does being Pakistani plays a role in them being criminals? Mohammed Qasim writes that the boys conform to the very British standards and perceive themselves to be British. They were born in England, they preferred to speak English when out of the home, and they were sometimes criticized by the elders for not speaking their ancestral language fluently. Their music, their food, their aspirations were all typical of their generation. On their occasional visits to Pakistan, they were regarded as British and not Pakistani by their Pakistani cousins. Many of them, as discussed in Chapter 6, hated their visits to Pakistan and could not wait to return home to the UK. These guys are, as he said, locked out of society. They feel in a state of siege. Because first of all, they grew up in a society that do not offer pathways to other career paths or to other opportunities. They are deprived from not only financial capital, but also networks, social capital, cultural capital. It's impossible for them to, let's say, for example, take up a job in the city of London. There is disconnection between the school system where they grew up and the rest of the society, and they just don't know, they are not given the tools. This is not something which has to do with ethnicity or religion, because this is a problem that white working class people also experience in all parts of England. People have very different relationships to their culture, to religion. As he writes further, some appeared deeply religious in their thinking. Others were very secular, with heavy drinking and gambling and drug habits. So Mohammed Qasim gives two, I would say, paths for explanations. He writes first that many of the elders encouraged the youth to abide by Islamic teachings. But in the eyes of the boys, some of the elders were ignorant of these themselves. The boys felt that there were some elders selling alcohol within their restaurants and shops, but then telling them to refrain from drug dealing. The other factor is, again, he writes, the alienation felt by the young men in matters of faith, as the imams appeared to be remote from young British Muslims because they were mostly born and raised in Pakistan. The elders were not respecting the teachings of Islam themselves, and many were not aware or understanding of the context of being born in Britain. It comes to a point where Islam ceases, it's not a moral framework anymore, but it becomes just an identity label, something which has to do with culture that people inherit. People end up not caring about doing things which are opposed to the teachings of Islam. And for those who care, they're basically left with no choice, because there is no alternatives in their minds. They know that what they do is wrong and it harms them and harms the society. but they genuinely see no other way out, and no matter the risk. Because I think now it's been 11 years I'm in the UK, and and as many of you, I'm sure, have heard stories of, people getting into drugs and ending up with their houses, their cars repossessed when the police finds out, or people who get caught by the police and are forced to see their kids grow, but from prison, because they get married, they have kids, but when they get locked into prison for sometimes a life sentence, they just the families end up being broken. But the situation is so harsh that these deterrents are not enough. People always think that it's worth the risk, but what Mohammed Qasim tells us is that why people get to that point, it's because there is collective failure somehow. There's first of all a failure of the state to provide the tools for these people to get out of these precarious situations, to be able to use their full potential in things that are genuinely constructive, into things that will be nurturing for them and the society. I have to say that this book made me very much empathetic to the experiences of these people. He wants to see a better society. These people, although involved in criminal activities, have not to be written off from the society, because what he sees, what he observes, is people with a lot of potential. He writes, "The boys have very strong positive values. They are committed wholeheartedly to their families and uphold virtues such as loyalty. They can be easily shocked, and notwithstanding the generalizations and stereotyping of the media, they have a very strong sense of honor and respectability. They are also highly intelligent, and in their criminality have demonstrated positive and entrepreneurial skills, which, if redirected to other activities, would strongly benefit society. These are talented young men who are locked out of society." So these are people with lots of potential, but because they don't tick the right boxes, because they just happen to be born and raised in the wrong area, the state and the society is not going to be there for them. But there's also a failure at a community level. Why do the elders are not there to show the example? Why is there not a culture of mentoring? It is a cascading problem which creates a vicious circle, because when one generation has not been given the tools to get out of it, the next generation, the younger, it's getting worse. People are becoming more violent, more harsh and ruthless, and less conscious of the implications of what they're doing. But he also interrogates the criminal justice system. The system in the UK is very much, about punishing rather than rehabilitating. And he makes the observation that as the boys, so this is the group he studies, he calls it the boys, as the boys age and desist, they are replaced by the younger and more bitter kids, who, the kids again is a name for the younger group of criminals, whose code of behavior and outlook on life is fiercer and potentially more threatening. So at the end of the day, these criminals who happen to be of Muslim descent, of South Asian descent, are a symptom of greater failures of the state and of the society in general. I like to think about an analogy with plants. They're not given a fertile soil for them to grow and be nurtured. They're just planted in the middle of an arid desert of sand. So I really hope that anyone who reads this book is going to realize that this phenomenon of Muslims who become criminal has nothing to do with the religion or the culture or the ethnicity. It has to do with complex failures at a societal level, at a state level. And I argue it's not enough to have motivational speakers like you're probably familiar with Akhi Ayman, who's been to prison and stuff, and now goes around the UK to deliver his talks. Because Mohammed Qasim argues that the system needs to change. Instead of a criminal, a punishing system, it needs to think about rehabilitation. How do we turn the lives of these people in a different way? How do we offer them alternatives? And until this is not resolved, the same cycle is going to go on and on. And it's not going to work to tell them that, it's haram, you shouldn't be doing this and this and that. But the question is, what do we do for all the people we have around us to make sure that they are properly nurtured, they are given not only advice but also the tools to imagine the possibilities that all the things they can do outside of what they think is only possible, because the society already does this job of constraining their mental, their cognitive universe to this like very, very narrow path. So I hope it was useful. Thank you for watching, and again, take care of yourselves and each other.
Everybody thinks they're a bad boy today. Everybody thinks they're a bad boy. I'll go to a community, a guy comes to me, babo, man's kidnapped guys, man shot couple guys, man stabbed couple guys, but obviously man's trying to come back on my heels. He's talking like this, it is where it is, you get me? How old are you? A man's 14.